a particular disease is associated with something which they are not. They see, for example, HIV/AIDS is associated with gay people, and they say, I'm not gay, I'm on the down low. It's a form of denial, but that's what exists. And that's the reason why, for example, the CDC refers to it as men who have sex with men. So in the reality that within inside the gay community, there are a very small number of people who are humping the shit out of them, who are banging everything as it bolted down, and the rest of them are about as boring as batshit like me. Let's not try to kid ourselves because you see on TV and this idea, for example, I'm just trying to remember that UK drama, that UK drama, that UK gay drama. I can't remember what it was called, but this idea that somehow everybody's bonking else with everybody else. The simple reality is, it's just not happening. What you're seeing on TV and what's put out there by the media just simply doesn't match up with reality. These are very small. It's like, for example, abortions. This idea that somehow almost every woman out there is getting abortions. The reality is that I think the average number of abortions, I think, it's something like incredibly. I'm trying to remember the statistics off my head, but it's something incredibly low. It's hardly anything. But there's a very, very small minority who are getting heaps and heaps of abortions. This is the other thing that frustrates me too. It's always a minority within society, but you tend to find that the media conflate it and try to exaggerate as if that somehow minority represents the whole of society, when in reality it doesn't. So this idea that somehow the West is somehow permissive, the best you can actually argue is that that the media tried to gain viewers by putting things on TV that seems to be risque, that seem to be going against the cultural taboos, as to get people to watch it, like watching a car crash in slow motion. But that's not pointing to the fact of any sort of acceptance within society. One would argue that, for example, there was an interesting point noted regarding what was known as the post-gay rights generation. And there was an interview with a whole group of different people, gay, lesbian, bisexual people, who were under 30, and many of them had no interest in the pride parades. I like what one gentleman said, who said that it's far too gay for me. We're talking about a post-gay rights community, whereby we have a whole lot of rabid middle-aged 40, 50-year-old queens who are hell-bent on, sticking it to the man and rebelling against the system, and let's overthrow the way the patriarchal family works. And guess what? 95% of other people, like in most cases, who think that the 5% on the fringe are complete batshit crazy and go about and have normal relationships, normal monogamous relationships, and want to have marriages and they want to have civil unions and all the other stuff that goes with it. In other words, the franchise of society, in other words, the franchises such as marriage and things like that, have just expanded. They just haven't. It's not as though they've somehow spontaneously combusted, and the idea of institution of marriage has suddenly become evaporated because we've allowed civil unions. The franchise has increased, and the same sort of expectations are placed upon gay couples. I mean, you'll hear, for example, people my age who expect that their partner is actually loyal, just like, for example, a heterosexual couple. Gone are the days, the promiscuous 1970s outlook on life. There's an expectation that you are actually going to, you've actually signed a contract, you've committed yourself to this relationship, and you expect some loyalty. And that through the act of self-restraint, you are demonstrating to your partner that your sexual gratification comes second place to maintaining this monogamous, healthy, stable relationship. But like I said, this idea that somehow because there has been the criminalisation of homosexuality, there has been the civil unions, that somehow it has made society more permissive to the point that nothing is taboo, simply ignores the reality of what's actually happening out there on the ground. Hence the problem of making judgment of a whole group of people based on what you see on the media and what you see on TV. But getting back to when I was talking about, for example, the punishments inside the Quran and the Bible, Abu al-Fadl went back into and gave some examples of basically saying, well, this is what it says in the Quran, and this is actually, here are some case examples in the past of actually what's actually happened. And what you tend to find is this idea of many cases that just simply didn't live up with reality. I mean, the case of, for example, the Ottoman Empire was Hanafi. And from what I understand, that many Hanafi jurists said that the only two things you could be executed for was treason and killing another person. That was it. That was generally speaking the status quo. They were the only two reasons why you could be killed. Things like extramarital affairs, fornication, these kinds of things. And by the way, homosexuality was put under the banner of fornication, not adultery. The most you can expect would be a couple of lashings. And even with the lashings, as he noted in the lecture, the lashings weren't actually, to break the skin and to make you feel pain. The whole point was to shame you, to put you out inside the community, a bit like the stocks. When they'd put you in the middle of the thing, you'd be like this, and you'd put your head through the stocks. And the whole point is meant to make you feel shamed, and everyone would know why you were there, and you'd feel so ashamed that you wouldn't want to do it again. You've lost face with inside your community. How well that would work in today's society, I don't know. It seems that people sometimes get their rocks off the idea of being a complete prat in society, but that's the basic idea. But it comes back to when we talk about the idea of Sharia in terms of formulating the laws, I wonder to what extent can there be a reapproach, specifically when we talk about, for example, the idea of interpreting how the Sunnah is understood in terms of the example principle idea rather than the literal idea. In terms of when we talk about the idea of his behaviour being of him being the perfect person, is it being a perfect person based on and from the point of view that he didn't get it necessarily right, but the fact is that his decision wasn't made with any sort of malicious intent. In other words, he gave out some advice or he gave out something and it wasn't tainted with malicious intent. He always had the best intentions behind all his actions. But I guess that could be another thing that could possibly be discussed. Or does one actually just whittle down, for example, the idea of the Sharia into, say, 5 basic principles, 5 axioms, and then what you do is then you create any sort of laws have to fit around those 5 criteria. So what happens is, in other words, it's not. In other words, you have the 5 principles, and it's up to, for example, consultation and agreement with inside society about the kinds of laws that are created and enforced, as long as they conform to those 5 principles. And I think in the case of somebody noted, for example, the idea of promoting the good and forbidding the bad, I think also at the same time there's a certain degree of pragmatism that needs to be taking place. And I think I noticed even with inside Muhammad when it talked about the idea of the lady who came up who had committed adultery and she wanted to be stoned to death. I'm sure some people have noted about this, that that within side that the issue was about maintaining social harmony, not necessarily creating the perfect society. This idea you can create a perfect society is a bit of a delusion, but can you create a society that sucks a little less? In other words, as soon as you start trying to create this, an ideology that tries to claim to be the be-all and end-all and address all problems, then you're going to end up having problems. Then everything turns to shit pretty quickly. But if your aim is to simply have a system that sucks a little less, and you fine-tune it and tweak it, then maybe that is what the end goal of Islam is. Not necessarily create the perfect society, but one that sucks considerably less than what the society looked like before. and be on a natural progression whereby that the basis on which society grows is on the basis in which individuals can grow as people can grow as individuals within inside that society. I'll just stop here and love to hear your feedback.